I'm back, and this time it's all about the boat. I'm going to do point and counterpoint, and I got to talk fast because there's a lot of stuff to cover. Let me begin with the prosecution's case. So they say starting on December 8th of 2002, Scott was doing internet searches, and he was looking for the following things. He was looking for marine tides, fishing, nautical charts, water currents, boat ramps at both the Monterey Bay and San Francisco Bay. They said his long-term plan was that he was going to buy the boat and he was going to use the boat to either kill his wife or dispose of her dead body. They said he's been planning this for weeks. On December 9th, Scott Peterson purchases a used 14-foot game fisher fishing boat for $1,400 cash. The prosecution believes this is a secret boat, that he never told anybody he bought the boat, and that includes Lacey, that he stored it in his warehouse and he kept it a secret. They state that Scott was not really an avid fisherman, and it was kind of an unusual purchase that he would buy a fishing boat, especially since he hadn't talked to anybody about it, and it just seemed like an unusual purchase. They say that December 24th was the first time he ever took the boat in the water, which Scott said as well. When they questioned him, that was the first time. They allege that what Scott did was that he transported Lacey's body wrapped in a tarp to the marina. He took her out in the boat to a specific area that they say he'd been searching. He tied her down with cement anchors that they believe he made in his workshop. There were 4 of them. He wrapped those around her limbs and dumped her in the water. They believe that the area where she was dumped was a very specific area where he said he was fishing. And that area was the depth of the water was as low as 3 feet during low tide. They can prove that Scott was at the marina because he never denied it. He said he went there that day, he went fishing, he provided them with a parking ticket where he paid for his parking. So he was there, I think it was $12.54 that day, and he was there for a couple of hours, then he left and returned home. They think during that period of time was when he dumped his wife's body into the water. The bodies of Lacey Peterson and their unborn son, Connor, washed up on the shore of the San Francisco Bay within 2 miles of where he said he was fishing in April of the following year. The police also searched the boat when Scott returned from the marina that night when they first made the 911 call that Lacey was missing. They searched his warehouse, they searched the boat. They found a pair of pliers that had one human hair in the pliers. They used mitochondrial DNA to identify that hair, and I'm going to do a separate video on that, so we can talk about that at a later date. But they also said that he made these cement anchors, these homemade cement anchors, in his warehouse as well. And there were pictures of that work area that were submitted into evidence. Now, what wasn't submitted into evidence by the police was a couple of things. So there's a detective Handy who testified in court that he really wanted to do a reenactment so they could go into court and they could say, here's exactly how he did it. But neither the police or the prosecution ever tried to go out in a boat and dump that much weight and see what would happen. And although there was evidence in court of Scott allegedly making the anchors and of the anchors' existence, there is no evidence presented in court of how or whether or not that much weight, so the 32 pounds of weights, would be enough to weigh down the body. This is probably because the San Francisco medical examiner had already told the police that they did not believe that 32 pounds of weight would drag down 153 pounds of human body, especially one that was wrapped in a tarp that might cause extra buoyancy. The prosecution and the press ran with this case, that this was the guy had no reason to buy a boat other than dispose of his wife. He admits he was there that day. She was found right near where he was fishing, and a hair was found in the boat. So this was all some pretty strong circumstantial evidence in the case against Scott Peterson. So let's do the counterpoint. So on December 7th, there is internet searches that Scott did where he was online at the online Modesto Bee, which is the newspaper, looking at ads for boats for sale. On December 8th, Scott did do internet searches. So it says right here that Detective Wall testified that Scott used his home computer to search for boating regulations, Department of Fish and Game rules and regulations, to search the classified ads for boats and for information on fishing. In all of Scott's computer use, there's only about 30 seconds total of material that contained any kind of charts for the San Francisco Bay. The prosecution and many news outlets egregiously referred to these 30 seconds as researching the currents of San Francisco Bay. He did buy the boat on December 9th. The seller of the boat testified. It was a used boat, and the man had had it for a few years. He testified to a number of things in court. Among them was that his belief was definitely Scott's intention was to buy a fishing boat. He bought the boat that had 2 fishing seats, rod holders. It had a fish finder, like it was equipped with items for fishing. This same owner had other boats for sale. So Scott could have purchased the same size boat without any of that stuff for a little bit less money. He also could have purchased a bigger boat, which you might need. This is a very small boat if you're thinking about dumping a human body. He could have bought a bigger boat without equipment for about the same amount of money as well. The defense claims that the boat was not a secret. In fact, there were 3 witnesses that spoke with police that all said that Scott had had conversations with them about buying boats. And this was as far back as prior to Thanksgiving, early in November, and one claimed it was all the way up to the 1st of December when they talked about perhaps maybe going in together on a speedboat. Scott wasn't maybe an avid fisherman, but this was the 4th boat that Scott had owned. So Scott wasn't any stranger. He grew up around boating. In fact, a month into his dating situation with Lacey, they had already gone on boating and fishing dates. The defense claims that Lacey did know about the boat, so Scott did pay cash because that's what the seller wanted him to pay, but he took the money out of their joint checking account. He registered it in his name, so he was absolutely honest with the Department of Motor Vehicles when he registered it. He also made no attempt to disguise who he was or use a fake name or anything with the buyer. And we know Lacey knew about the boat because there was a witness at Scott's warehouse that used the neighboring warehouse that told police that they had witnessed Lacey at the warehouse on or around December 20th when Scott brought her there to show her the boat. This witness spoke with Detective Brocchini. He wrote it in his notes, but then later intentionally omitted that statement out of his notes so that it wouldn't go into the evidence for the case, because then that kind of destroyed the idea of it being a secret boat and Lacey not knowing. The defense claims that the boat itself, which was like a 14-foot kind of aluminum boat, and it had a 15 horsepower motor, that they don't believe that the boat would have been able to withstand that level of weight and activity without sinking. The manufacturer of the boat testified that they had done some stability trials on the boat, and what they did was they took 142 pounds of weight and they evenly distributed it throughout the boat. And when they did that, the back right corner of the boat, which is kind of where the motor is, that it was heavy enough that the boat was already submerged in the water by an inch. The test was done in a pool with no wind and no current. All total that day, for this to have happened, there would have been 385 pounds aboard that boat. Scott weighed 200, Lacey weighed 153, and the anchors would have come in at about 32 pounds. So increasing the weight up to 385, it absolutely sunk the back right end of the boat in all of their trials. There were also additional trials that were done by the defense, but those were not admitted into court. They were ruled as inadmissible and could not be shown to the jury. The defense said that Scott's boat was also equipped with a fish finder, which tells you the depth of the water. So if you really were going to go dump a body, wouldn't you go to a place where it was incredibly deep, or as deep as you could find? Yet they claim he dumped the body. Where he dumped the body would have been in 3 feet of water. Now he was fishing, or he claimed to be fishing for sturgeon, which requires about 5 to 15 feet of depth. That's usually where they're most plentiful. So to the defense, it doesn't make sense that Scott would be fishing in such short water, or that he would even think to dump a body in such shallow water. And I can talk more about this later, but simply Scott said that he made the anchors because an anchor cost about $30, and he said he could get a bag of cement for about $3. So he was just being cost effective in his mind when he made those anchors. More to come.